Lebanese Christians, and specifically the Maronites, are absolutely not newcomers to the land they call home. They are an indigenous people, the direct descendants of the ancient Phoenicians, and their roots are permanently anchored in the soil of Lebanon. For decades, a relentless campaign of historical falsification has tried to rewrite this reality. They've tried to paint Lebanon's Christian communities as outsiders, migrants, or refugees, but that's simply not true. We're talking about an undeniable, historical, biblical, archaeological, and genetic legacy of a people who have stood their ground for over 10 millennia. Okay, let's dive into this. The history of Lebanon is literally the history of a native population that has fiercely defended its ancestral homeland through empires, invasions, and massacres. The Christian presence here doesn't just begin a few centuries ago. It traces a continuous, unbroken line straight back to the Phoenician civilization, carrying forward through the very dawn of the Apostolic Age and enduring every single political upheaval right up to the present day.
Part 1. Early Foundations in Phoenicia.
To really understand the depth of this heritage, we have to go back to the very beginning of the Christian faith. The Phoenician Church stands proudly as one of the absolutely earliest Christian communities in the world. Now, this wasn't a religion brought to them by later empires. No, it was established directly during the Apostolic Age on Phoenician soil. The apostles themselves traveled through Phoenician cities, actively setting up the first Christian churches and welcoming Gentile converts. And the hierarchy? It was cemented from the earliest possible moment. St. Peter himself appointed the very first bishop of Phoenicia Maritima. He didn't stop there either. He appointed bishops for Byblos, Berytus, which is modern-day Beirut, and Botrys, known today as Butrun. This established a deeply rooted, highly organized Christian presence right at the absolute dawn of the faith.
And the biblical record confirms this physical connection with total clarity. Jesus Christ himself visited and preached in Lebanon. Matthew 15:21 explicitly tells us, leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. He walked on this very Lebanese soil. Furthermore, his mother, the Virgin Mary, awaited him in the Magdashe cave in southern Lebanon. That's a site of monumental sacred importance to indigenous Christians even to this day. Let's move to and see how this builds, because this foundational presence only got stronger. In 58 AD, St. Paul stopped at Tyre on his journey from Rome to Jerusalem and found an already thriving, perfectly established Christian community. For the next 2.5 centuries, these Phoenician Christians faced brutal Roman persecutions. They coexisted with pagan communities and endured immense suffering. That is until the early 4th century, when Emperor Constantine's conversion finally allowed Christianity to become the dominant faith in the region.
Part 2. Persecution in secret sites. So the transition from Roman persecution to wider acceptance was really just one chapter in a long history of survival. The geography of Lebanon, particularly its rugged mountains, became the ultimate fortress for preserving authentic Maronite and Syriac traditions, rites, and culture. After the Edict of Milan in 313 AD established religious tolerance, the Christian identity in Lebanon just continued to crystallize. Empress Helena formally established the Shrine of Our Lady of Magdoshi, honoring the place of the awaiting. Centuries later, during the Crusader era, the Maronite Church formally accepted papal supremacy, yet fiercely retained its own patriarch and its totally unique ancient liturgy. The continuous thread of this faith is perfectly symbolized by the rediscovery of the Magdoshi Shrine in the early 17th century under Prince Fakhreddin II. It completely reinforces that the sacred heritage was never lost. It was only protected. And that protection required intense strategy and sacrifice. With the spread of Islamic conquests along the coast, the native Lebanese Christians made a calculated, absolutely essential retreat. They withdrew into the formidable heights of Mount Lebanon. Isolated from outside influence, they acted as indigenous defenders of their ancestral lands. Up in these high-altitude sanctuaries, they kept the memory of their sacred sites alive, preserving a language and a set of customs that are uniquely Lebanese.
Part 3. Massacres and Resilience, 1840 to 1860.
This brings us to a desperately dark period in the 19th century. The indigenous status of the Maronites and their absolute claim to their ancestral homeland was violently challenged. We see Ottoman machinations, foreign influences, and intense, orchestrated violence aimed at erasing their presence. Between 1840 and 1860, interreligious massacres deliberately devastated towns and villages. In 1842, Deir al-Qamar, the main Maronite town in the Shauf, was burned to the ground, and fleeing Maronites were slaughtered. In 1858, driven by feudal oppression, a peasant revolt erupted in Kesrouen, led by the Maronite Tenyus Shahin. But the most catastrophic violence came in the major massacres of 1860, targeting Maronites and Christians across Shauf, Deir al-Qamar, Jezin, Hasbaya, Rashaya, Zahle, and the surrounding areas, and Ottoman authorities were deeply involved, often actively aiding the attackers.
By June of 1860, the devastation had reached apocalyptic proportions. Well over 300 villages were completely destroyed. Churches, colleges, and ancient convents were burned or looted. Anywhere from 7,000 to 20,000 Christians were slaughtered, leaving 80,000 as refugees in their own land, with countless more widowed or orphaned. These massacres underscore a tragic but vital reality. Lebanese Christians were absolutely not migrants caught in a crossfire. They were indigenous victims defending their ancestral homeland against systematic eradication.
Part 4. Genetics and Historical Identity.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how the survival of this population brings us to modern genetic evidence. In 2017, the American Association of Human Genetics confirmed something incredible. A staggering 93% of modern Lebanese DNA perfectly matches ancient Canaanite and Phoenician populations. This definitively challenges any claims that Lebanese Christians are migrants from outside regions. The blood running through their veins today is the exact same blood that built Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos millennia ago. There's just no denying it. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer historical weight of the region's name compared to the surrounding areas. The name Lebanon is ancient. It appears in the Epistle of Gilgamesh around 5000 BC. In stark contrast, the name Syria only appears thousands of years later, in 64 BC, merely as a Roman administrative designation. In fact, the word Syria itself is a Canaanite Phoenician name originally referring to Mount Hermon. So there was no natural or unified Syrian entity that Lebanon was somehow carved out of. Lebanon predates the Roman concept of Syria by over 4,900 years.
Lebanon has always been a self-contained, historically and culturally distinct entity. Its borders have been historically defined and recognized since absolute antiquity. It is meticulously documented in biblical records, and its historical geography comprises the entire coastal region all the way up to Ugarit. These ancient borders were formally recognized at the Versailles Conference in 1919, firmly anchoring the origin of Lebanon's Christian population entirely within its own historical borders. Claims that they originated elsewhere are simply false.
Part 5. Recovery and Autonomy in the Post-Massacre Era.
Following the horrific massacres of 1860, the sheer resilience of this indigenous population forced the hand of history. European powers, notably France, intervened, compelling the Ottoman Empire to finally recognize Lebanese autonomy. This recognition was formalized in the Statute of 1861, which was later revised in 1864. It officially confirmed Lebanese autonomy, specifically preserving those mountainous regions where Maronites and other Christians had retreated and thrived. The region was governed by a non-Lebanese Christian Mutasarrif, alongside a council of representatives from Lebanon's religious communities. Now, even though the Ottomans intentionally excluded the coastal plains and ports from this autonomous zone, Lebanon experienced a profound era of prosperity, insecurity, economics, and culture. It was a spectacular demonstration of the vitality of a native Christian population rebuilding their ancestral home. So, the crucial point is this. Lebanese Christians and the Maronites are the native sons and daughters of this land. They're not outsiders. From the Phoenician civilization through the very first sparks of the Apostolic Age, enduring Roman persecution, Islamic conquests, Ottoman machinations, and devastating massacres, they have survived. The mountains, the towns, the shrines, and the very DNA of the people tell an undeniable story. They have preserved their faith, their identity, and their sovereignty against all odds. This is an unbroken indigenous legacy that shapes the past, present, and future of Lebanon. As we look at the modern Middle East today, we have to ask, how might acknowledging this deep, 10-millennial-old continuity change the way the world understands Lebanon's place in history?